Welcome to the BEASTwriter family, where social media engagement is encouraged. I am your host, Ryan Sakamoto, and today we are going to be continuing my 32 NFL draft grades as it pertains to the 2021 NFL Draft. Now, before we go ahead and get started, I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for subscribing to my channel. Just be sure to turn on and flip on the bell notifications so you get notified when I go live or when I upload content. All right, guys, so we're going to stay within the NFC South. Yesterday, I already broke down the Atlanta Falcons. The day before that, I broke down the Carolina Panthers. And today, on Wednesday, we are breaking down the New Orleans Saints and making sense of the team reaching for defensive end Payton Turner in the first round, but striking back and coming back in a hard way and in a good way on day 3. All right, so we're just going to dive right into it. I'm going to move up these tickers. And again, for those who are new to subscribing to my channel, mahalo and thank you for tuning in. Be sure to go ahead and spread the word to all your family and friends. If you like the content, that's the only way that we're going to grow is by spreading the word. So be sure to do that if you like the content, because odds are if you like it, someone else does as well. All right. So also, I like to break down, moving on, into 3 parameters as I break down all my podcasts. The first parameter is who are the players or coaches involved. The second parameter is why the move was made or potentially could be made. And the last but not least parameter is the instant gratification versus long-term gains. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about that and start with the first round pick. Let me just pull up that ticker. I know you guys love these tickers. Is it up there? Yeah. All right, so Payton Turner was drafted in the first round, number 28 overall, and I believe this was a huge reach at number 28. It was one of the surprise picks in the first round based on my analytics and based on my big board. I thought Payton Turner was no better than a third-round pick. He ultimately falls in the first round. And same thing that happened with Marcus Davenport back in 2018 was I thought he was a reach at 14. And look at where he is today. He's not really getting it done. 2018, 2019, now going into his 4th year. So they're going to have some dealing and willing and dealing to do because obviously Marcus Davenport wasn't getting it done. They then reached for another edge rusher in this year's draft class in the tail end of the first round, getting Payton Turner. Now, why is Payton Turner a reach? Well, if you look at the depth position and where they currently stand at wide receiver, you can argue that wide receiver was not only a positional need, but you could have selected the best player available at that position. You look at who was left on the board. You have Elijah Moore, who's my number 1 slot receiver in this entire draft class, sitting there. And you also can stay in-house, in-state, and select my top 25 player on my big board in wide receiver Terrace Marshall. So why didn't they go after those 2 players is beyond me, because right now your wide receiver 2 is Traquan Smith. And we don't know what's going to happen with Michael Thomas because he kind of had an up and down year, had some off-field issues, getting a fight with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and then was suspended and then had some injuries. And so we don't know what we're getting with Michael Thomas after having a offensive player of the year type of season back in 2019. 2020 wasn't so kind to him. And now here we are in 2021 where they really needed to solidify some kind of an insurance policy at the wide receiver position for whoever's at quarterback. Because remember, Drew Brees just retired. So I thought Terrace Marshall, Elijah Moore would have been a better fit, better value at pick number 28. They opted to reach for need, diminishing the value of the pick at number 28, taking Payton Turner, who, again, would have gone in the 3rd round as possibly a day 2 pick, but certainly not in day 1. And that's something that you have to take into account. And if you're saying, okay, well, we really needed to address the defensive line. Okay, I get it. But why go Payton Turner? Why not go and get a 4-3 defensive tackle like Christian Barmore, who's the best interior rusher in this draft class coming out of Alabama Roll Tide role? Why not go that route? Because who did you lose? You just lost Sheldon Rankins to the New York Jets, and then you lost Malcolm Brown to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So you don't have any starting defensive tackles to begin with anyways. So why not build the team from the inside out, not the outside in, as I always like to say, and get yourself the best player at valued at number 28, rather than reaching for need, diminishing the value pick like you did back in 2018 with a guy like Marcus Davenport. I see a similar type of player and little to no upside with Payton Turner, because at the end of the day, you're going based on his potential. But the same thing was said back in 2018 when GM Mickey Loomis made that play for Marcus Davenport. All right. So again, this is why I believe Payton Turner was a reach. I'm going to go ahead and talk about that a little bit later as to why it was a bad move. But I just pointed out 3 players at a position of need who were all better values at sitting there at number 28. Excuse me. So when you take that into account and then you peel back another layer of the onion to really get to the core, as I always like to say in my podcast, well, Payton Turner comes with red flags. He comes with red flags, guys, and it's not good for him because at the end of the day, it's almost like you're getting damaged goods returned. He had a hand injury, he had a knee injury, and he had a foot injury. So those are red flags throughout his college career. And then when you take that a step further, and in the pre-draft process, he was asked where his natural fit is. It wasn't defensive end, guys. It wasn't playing in a 3-point stance. It was in a 2-point stance as an outside linebacker. So for me, Payton Turner even admitted he's not even a great fit playing a defensive end position, that he's better suited for a 2-point stance outside linebacker. His words, not mine. So again, you can see where Mickey Loomis kind of dropped the ball here, reaching for need, because again, Marcus Davenport wasn't getting it done. And this is the 4th defensive end that Mickey Loomis has drafted since 2002. He drafted Will Smith in 2004 out of the Ohio State University. He drafted Cam Jordan in 2011 out of Berkeley. And then he drafted Marcus Davenport, who we just touched base on, in 2018. So Payton Turner becomes the 4th defensive end drafted by Mickey Loomis in the 1st round. And again, it was a reach need pick. And if I was to put a grade on this, it's not favorable. Sorry, Mickey Loomis. I think you're a top 10 GM. However, you whiffed on this one and struck out. And that's why I gave you a solid D. All right. Now let's move on to Pete Werner. Pete Werner, here we go. Speaking of the Ohio State University, because we all just talked about Will Smith, he was drafted in the 2nd round, number 60 overall. Now, Pete Werner was somebody who's very stable, who's very consistent. He's a sound tackler. He's a true technician of the game. He doesn't have the best athleticism, but he gets the job done. So you can kind of see where Mickey Loomis was doing here. However, I'm not sure this was a right pick because, again, look at what I said just earlier in regards to Payton Turner. They could have got Terrace Marshall here. Just kidding. He went 1 pick earlier to the Carolina Panthers. So they missed out on Terrace Marshall. Okay, but then why not use the shotgun approach and get my top 5 Senior Bowl pre-draft prospect in Carlos Basham Jr.? That's right. I put up earlier podcasts and how it ties to this one and how it's relatable to this one. I said Carlos Basham was one of my top 5 ranked players to watch before the Senior Bowl even hit. Him along with Quincy Roche. So again, why not go after Carlos Basham, who just went 1 pick later to the Buffalo Bills and use the shotgun approach because you all know what they did, right? And if not him, because it got Gregory Rousseau in the 1st round, they doubled down on those games with the shotgun approach, getting Carlos Basham Jr., Brandon Beane specifically. If not going after the defensive line, why not solidify the outside linebacker position? And if you're going to do that, why not go after a guy like Ronnie Perkins? Ronnie Perkins was sitting there at number 60. He would have been a great value coming out of Oklahoma. Both players, Basham and Perkins, were better valued than Werner, sitting there at number 60. And that's why for this grade, although I like the positional need, I don't like the selection and the valuation of that player sitting there at 60. So I'm going to have to give this grade a solid C because, again, Ronnie Perkins was better. He goes off to the New England Patriots. Who did I just say before that? On their 1st pick, Christian Barmore, who goes off to who? The New England Patriots. There's a reason why the New England Patriots are good every year because teams like Mickey Loomis and the Saints, they reach for need sometimes, and that drops the better player on the board. That's why they're always in it to win it. So Bill Belichick strikes gold, not benefiting, or I should say benefiting from Saints GM Mickey Loomis's mistakes. Goes without saying. And again, Pete Werner, Ronnie Perkins, Carlos Basham, Pete Werner. Come on. Come on, guys. So again, a solid C in round 2 for Mickey Loomis and the New Orleans Saints. All right, this is where it gets really interesting and the tides have turned. In the 3rd round, the New Orleans Saints, make sure that ticker's up. Yeah, okay. In the 3rd round, the New Orleans Saints did something good. They traded multiple 3rd round picks, number 98 and number 105, to the Denver Broncos, which I have already covered in the Denver Broncos draft grade podcast, and I'll include that in the description box below. But you can see why they made this move in trading number 98 and number 105 in the 3rd round to move up to number 76 and that was for cornerback Paulson Adebo. In the third round, you will notice that these cornerbacks were flying off the board, and GM Mickey Loomis was smart enough to say, hey, you know what? We're not going to get the guy we want at valuation in the third round based on our value board if we don't trade up and make a play here. So let's see if we can make a trade with Denver. George Payton obviously likes to wheel and deal because he comes from the assistant GM position over at the Minnesota Vikings under GM Rick Spielman. He likes to wheel and deal. So he's like, hey, let's see if we can strike a deal. They did, and they got Paulson Adebo. And I really like Paulson Adebo here in the third round, number 6 overall. And again, those picks that the New Orleans Saints gave up were compensatory selections for losing GM Terry Fontenot to the Atlanta Falcons and then losing Teddy Bridgewater the year before going to the Carolina Panthers. All right. So again, Adebo fell due to COVID, being a COVID-19 opt-out. He didn't play in 2020. His tape in 2019 was somewhat good. I mean, it was kind of shaky, but some would consider him a day 2 pick if he was come out of that draft. But what I really like about Paulson Adebo, and again, we don't know what's going on with Marshawn Lattimore because although he's very talented on the field, he has some off-the-field issues with an unregistered handgun or something like that, some sort of issues going that route. So he has some issues there. Aside from that, they just released Janoris Jenkins. So they need for a boundary cornerback is there. And what Paulson Adebo brings to the table is he has ball skills that can't be denied, right? He attacks the point at the catch point. He plays the ball like a wide receiver, and he's aggressive in run support. Although his tackling can do a little fine-tuning in terms of coaching up, and his technique needs work, but the critical factors are there for him to succeed. So again, in the third round, moving up from number 98 and 105 to number 76, they really get the player that they feel is valuable and would actually help their long-term growth. And that's where the long-term gains come into play. So for this grade valuation, I will give them an A grade on this selection. Good job by Mickey Loomis. So you see, take the good with the bad. I'm very 100 on the Demons. All right, moving on down. We have Ian Book in the fourth round. Let's make up that tickers here. Yeah. So Ian Book was drafted in the fourth round, number 133 overall, and someone questioned as to why. Well, Drew Brees just retired. They gave Taysom Hill that $140 million contract. However, that was just to give instant cap relief, and the last 3 years of that contract are voidable. So in essence, it just gave him about $7.5 million in cap relief, and he has a 12-point-something number or whatever that number is for the 2021 season. So moving on from wide receiver position or the gadget player to a now quarterback position, he gets paid like a quarterback. He'll be fighting that spot for Jameis Winston. But then you add a guy like Ian Book, who you can kind of groom for the foreseeable future. Now, Ian Book does not have the NFL arm talent to really thrive in the NFL level. But the same was said of another Notre Dame quarterback by the name of Joe Montana, right? So they were saying, oh, Joe Montana doesn't have the NFL arm strength. He can't get it done. And all Joe Montana do was what? Become one of the greatest Super Bowl winning quarterbacks of all time. 4-0. Can't go wrong with that. And arguably the best quarterback of all time. So Joe knows football, absolutely, and he proved and silenced his doubters wrong coming out of Notre Dame. Why can't Ian Book do the same? Now, I'm not saying Ian Book's going to be the next Joe Montana, but you can see what Payton is doing here in terms of building the team around their future because Drew Brees is now gone. You want to create camp competition. You have Ian Book, who's going to be sitting behind Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill, obviously, in 2021. However, when 2022, when 2023 hits, that's when these guys' contracts are going to start to expire. Ian Book could be in line for that starting role or at least be in conversation for the camp competition. Again, what I like about Ian Book here is I watched every snap of him last year. I like his leadership qualities. I like his command in the huddle. I like his poise. Now, I like his ability to evade rushers when under duress. These are some things that I see in him. But again, he's a developmental quarterback at best with raw potential right now. And as of right now, I think the best scenario for Ian Book is to sit and learn behind Jameis Winston, learn behind Taysom Hill, learn the system under Sean Payton, and really get to know how the Saints operate and sit behind those quarterbacks for a 2 to 3 year vision outlook, and then tackling on starting duties thereafter if he's ready. So Ian Book was a great find in the fourth round at number 133 overall. So I would give them a grade of an A for this draft class as it pertains to this selection. All right. Now let's go ahead and look at the rest of the draft picks. Here we go. Is it up there? Yeah. So now we have the remaining draft pick selections, right? They went ahead and got Landon Young, and they traded up with the Indianapolis Colts, yielding a 6th-round pick, number 218 overall, with GM Chris Ballard, and they also yielded a 7th-round pick, number 229, I believe. So when you give up 2 late-round picks, a 6th and a 7th, and move up for how many spots was it? I think it was 12 spots, if I'm doing the math correctly. Moving 12 spots and getting a guy that they thought would be in their plans for the foreseeable future in Landon Young in the later half of the draft. That was a smart play again by Mickey Loomis, because again, this draft class is not very deep, and I've said it since day one. So by doing so, you're really getting and solidifying your 53 or 55 or 56-man routes, or whatever the case may be, plus the practice squad players, and really formulating that game plan as to how you want to formulate your team moving forward. Because you don't trade 2 draft picks to move up later on in the draft, just 12 spots to get a guy when obviously he didn't feel like he was going to actually have a fighting chance at making this team. And that's why I like that play. So again, the rest of the draft picks were good. And then they finished it off with wide receiver Kawan Baker in the 7th round, drafted number 255. So again, that kind of wraps up the Saints draft class. Again, I liked how they went ahead and got a wide receiver here, but it was a little late. I would have rather them go after Elijah Moore. I would have liked them to go after Terrace Marshall. Obviously, the Carolina Panthers saw that. When you fell all the way to number 59, the Carolina Panthers got him. You can see my description podcast and that draft grade on the Carolina Panthers in the description box below, along with the Denver Broncos. And who else did I do? Oh, the Atlanta Falcons. So you guys can see where I'm trending and where my draft grades are going. All right. As it currently stands, for the final grade for this particular podcast, as it pertains to the New Orleans Saints, I'm going to have to give them a solid C grade. Because again, you reach for Payton Turner, you win on day 3, you pick up a guy like Ian Book, that's good. You pick up a guy like Paulson Adebo, that's good. But then you miss out on Elijah Moore, Terrace Marshall. Elijah Moore is going to be the next Brandon Cooks in that system if he was to go there. I'm telling you, the guy's a beast. And unfortunately, Mickey Loomis thought that drafting an edge rusher was a more pressing need. If not defensive line and going edge rusher, stay within the defensive line. I get it. But then get a guy like Christian Barmore, who's the top interior rusher from your 34 base defensive end position, but in your 4-3 front, you can shrink him inside to a defensive tackle 3 technique. Just saying it. All right, well, that's it for me. I hope you liked what I had to say, as that's the end of this podcast. If you like my analysis and insights, please be sure to hit the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen as you stay up to date on all things Beast in real time. All right, let's hear it. Saints fans, what are your thoughts? BEASTwriter family, BWF, what are your thoughts? You guys are my oxygen. Please drop your comments in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Thank you for tuning in. I love engaging with this platform. And mahalo. It seems to be a hit on my NFL draft grades. I'll be coming back right around the corner, finishing up in the NFC South on the Tampa Bay Bucks. So stay tuned for that one as we keep things hot here in the BEASTwriter family.